And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode of the Jazz Update, it's about the biography and best hits of jazz guitarist Blake Aaron. He's a #1 Billboard producer, also a producer for other artists. He has an incredible streak of having 5 of his singles topping the Billboard charts in the contemporary jazz genre. His smash hit album Color and Passion had 3 #1 singles topping the charts upon release. His next album, Love and Rhythm, followed up with 2 Billboard chart-topping singles. Blake began performing as a guitarist in Los Angeles. He's performed alongside other jazz greats from Najee to Bobby Womack to Darren Run. He's also composed for TV shows like Super Dave Osborne, Comedy Central, The Ben Stiller Show, and more. So that was a quick introduction into the biography of Blake Aaron, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about his biography and best hits, also some trending festival and album news. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva to find out more. We'll be right back after some music. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's show, it's about the life and times and best hits of jazz guitarist Blake Aaron. And on this hour, we're going to be talking about his biography. He's a #1 Billboard producer, also a producer for other artists, and an iconic jazz guitarist. He has an incredible streak of having 5 of his singles topping the Billboard charts in the contemporary jazz genre. His smash hit album Color and Passion had 3 #1 singles topping the charts upon release. His next album, Love and Rhythm, followed up with 2 Billboard chart-topping singles. Blake began performing as a guitarist in Los Angeles. He's performed alongside other jazz greats from Najee to Bobby Womack to Darren Run. He's also composed for TV shows like Super Dave Osborne, Comedy Central, The Ben Stiller Show, and more. He was once named a genius on the guitar by the Los Angeles Times. His guitar style is characterized by its passion and ability to connect with the audience. He released his first album on Inversion Records in 2001. It was called With Every Touch and included special guest appearances by Eric Marienthal and David Benoit. 3 singles from this album ended up topping the charts for 8 weeks. He was propelled to the forefront of the contemporary jazz charts with his second single, She's So Fine, released in 2004, which also ended up on the top 30 radio and records charts for 8 weeks. He also started performing on TV shows around that time. In 2007, he released another CD called Desire. This one was packed with beautiful tracks from groovy to nostalgic and included some of his best hits like Bumping on the West Side. This album remained in the top 20 on the radio and records charts for 15 weeks. In 2008, Blake began hosting a radio show called The Blake Aaron Show from KSBR. This show is all about bringing fans of contemporary jazz closer to their favorite music, and has had guest stars like Shirley Minogue, Freddie Fox, Boney James, Craig Giacchino, and more. So that was a quick insight into the biography of Blake Aaron, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On today's show, it's all about jazz guitarist Blake Aaron. Now for some news about a jazz art exhibition. So recently, saxophonist Alan Mesquida was performing at the Stained Glass Music Studio in Pasadena with his jazz quartet. The event was an exhibition of his live performances and also his art exhibits. It was the first time both his visual art and live performances were showcased in the same venue. He and his quartet treated the audience to a string of jazz classics. Also at that event, several of his portraits of jazz legends like Sonny Rollins, Chet Baker, and Miles Davis went up for exhibition in the Stained Glass Music Studio. They are available for viewing every time he and his quartet perform during their monthly shows. He's also hoping to come up with future events inspired by his passion for bebop, inspired by these legendary musicians. So Mesquida, a bit of background, he saw his peak in the 90s when he was collaborating alongside other jazz greats like Brad Mehldau, Bill Charlap, Roy Hargrave, and more. During quarantine, it was lockdown season, and he channeled his passion for jazz into painting portraits of jazz legends. He's also started a website, thejazzdive.com, that brings his artwork to his fans. So you can check out his latest works on his art website. You can also check out his Instagram channel for updates on future gigs on The Jazz Dive on Instagram. And that was some trending news about an iconic art exhibition, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Blake Aaron's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva, where we talk about a leading jazz icon down the timeline of jazz. I'm Jashan, your host, and on today's show, it's all about jazz guitarist Blake Aaron. On this hour, some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what we're going to be talking about on this hour. The first album is called Color and Passion. As soon as this album was released, 2 singles from the album, Love and Color and Passion, were topping the Billboard charts for the entire year 2019. On one of the singles, Groovers and Shakers, Blake teams up with Darren Run. Fall For You is a self-produced, silky smooth song. With his 3rd chart-topping hit, we see him collaborate with Adam Hawley on Sunday Strut. Love and Rhythm was Blake's seventh studio album. As soon as this album was released, two of its singles were topping the Billboard charts. So Blake's theme for this album was a blend of different music genres. In this album, he blends jazz, R&B, Brazilian and pop music. In his own words, this album reflected his passion for all genres of rhythm and music. The next album is Aaron's fifth studio album, and it's called Soul Stories. It consists of a compilation of smooth jazz tracks. And an album called Desire, a captivating collection of tracks, mostly original compositions. And that was a quick recap of the albums we are going to be talking about on this hour. You're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel for archives of today's show on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. We'll be right back after some music. Stay tuned. And welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva, where we talk about a leading jazz icon from down the timeline of jazz. I'm Jashan, your host, and on today's show, it's all about jazz guitarist Blake Aaron. On this hour, some of his best albums of all time. The first album is called Color and Passion. Now, as soon as this album was released, two singles from the album, Love and Color and Passion, were topping the Billboard charts for the entire year of 2019. On one of the singles, Groovers and Shakers, Blake teams up with Darren Rahn. Fall For You is a self-produced silky smooth song. With his third chart-topping hit, we see him collaborate with Adam Hawley on Sunday Strut. So Blake is famous for slow, mournful songs, and this album compilation is a deviation from that. It's full of peppy up-tempo tracks. On the song Drive, Darren Rahn and Blake pulsate with energy, even more so on Daylight with their island-like calypso sound. So this album was released in 2019, and most of the tracks in this album are previously released singles that saw success on the Billboard charts. So this album is basically a cross-section of Blake Aaron's musical style. There's one cover of a Stevie Wonder classic in this album, also a bunch of original compositions and collaborations between Blake and Darren Rahn and Adam Hawley. Fall For You is the opening song, a very catchy tune. On Sunday Strut, it's saxophone great Naji that is the highlight. Vivid is another highlight of this album. It's as good as new when it was released to massive success in 2017. The title track, Color and Passion, is a very romantic, dreamy piece that sounds like a movie soundtrack. There's also elements of Pat Metheny's screechy guitar playing in this song. And there's also a beautiful rendition of a Stevie Wonder cover, Don't You Worry About a Thing. So it's a bunch of Latin-themed tracks with an all-star cast of musicians. Love and Rhythm was Blake Aaron's seventh studio album. As soon as this album was released, two of its singles were topping the Billboard charts. So Blake's theme for this album was a blend of different music genres. He co-wrote the 10 tracks alongside Billboard chart toppers Adam Hawley and Greg Manning. In this album, he blends jazz, R&B, Brazilian and pop music. In his own words, this album reflected his passion for all genres of rhythm and music. He said, I have spent my life in pursuit of exploring the beauty of every genre of music there is. I will not even scratch the surface of the depth and beauty of the performance, composition and production of all genres of music. So on this album, Greg is joined by instrumentalists like Bob Mensah, Greg Manning, Trevor Newman and more. The opening track ended up becoming one of the hit singles from the album. It's called Dreamland. It's an upbeat, feel-good track. A similar track, Feels So Good, comes with vocals by Ken Turner. A heartwarming romantic ballad, She's the One, also made it to the top 5 of the Billboard charts upon release. This one's a song about that magical moment when you're in love and you know she's the one. Big Bounce gives us some epic horn music playing by the likes of David Sanborn, Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire. And The Way You Sway, a throwback to the past where Blake goes back to the 70s for a rendition of R&B and soul groove. So it's a wonderful album that blends jazz with various styles, reflected by Blake's love for various rhythms and music styles. The next album was Aaron's fifth studio album. It's called Soul Stories. It consists of a compilation of smooth jazz tracks. It starts off with a beautiful track called Groove-O-Matic. This one's a tight up-tempo track featuring groovy beats, great for a dance track. There's two vocal tracks on the album. You're My Miracle is performed by Derek Bordeaux on vocals, and You're the One for Me featuring Spencer Day. The standout track from this album is a Wes Montgomery tribute. It's called West Side Story. It's smooth jazz tinged with Latin rhythm. Europa is an ode to outer space, and The Cosmos, a spaced out track. There's also a complex flute melody featuring Naji on flute called Encantadara. There's a very emotional, passionate song called Sarah Smile. The next album is called Desire, a captivating collection of music, mostly original compositions. The album starts off with another Wes Montgomery tribute called Bumping on the West Side. It's a light, cheerful track and Blake composed it himself. Another passionate composition, this one's a dedication to jazz icon Thelonious Monk called Harmonious Funk. There's a beautiful guitar cover of a Billy Preston classic, Will It Go Round in Circles, where Aaron shows off his prowess on the guitar. He's joined by Mike Whittaker on piano and organ and Jeff Coffins on saxophone on this track. And on Fragile, a classic by Sting, Blake's rendition is nostalgic and inspiring. His one's a Latin-themed take on the song, and he's backed by Sal Cracchiolo on trumpet and Eric Jorgensen on trombone, also Will Donato on saxophone. Forever, a soulful track on which we see some vocals from T.J. Gibson, a timeless love song. And that was an insight in some of Blake Aaron's best albums, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On today's show, it's about jazz guitarist Blake Aaron. Now for some trending album news. Guitarist Olin Clark is out with a new album. It's called Ephrema. Ephrema is a genre-blending world of jazz, and it's out for release on July 19th. This album sees influences from jazz, rock, folk, experimental and metal. It features some of the best names out there, like Nathan Reesing on saxophone, Evan Hyde on drums, and Dan Montgomery on bass. There's also guest appearance on vocals by singer Lily Tamers and keyboardist Aidan Cafferty. So the general theme of the album is the concept of impermanence, memories, memorabilia, how we dwell on the past and look to the future. A compilation of original compositions by the guitar maestro features some tracks like Anything But, full of sweet lyrics, Coveted, a math rock rhythm, There's Always a Place, Ephrema, and more. And that was some trending album news, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. I'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about more of Blake Aaron's best albums of all time. Stay tuned.